Hi there, students. I'm XS, that's little x, little s, which stands for extra sweet, cause that's what I am. I'm a Puppy-sensei and I make Japanese content to help you level up your abilities. Today's grammar drop is going to be pretty straightforward. I know sometimes I have the tendency to be a little bit flowery in how I present some of these short grammar lessons, but today's lesson is fairly concise, really, so I thought I would also try to be concise. Today we're learning this grammar point, Niyoruto. Niyoruto. It's basically a way of saying according to, and it's really easy to use. Before I provide you with some example sentences, I want to simply show you the very direct way that we always use this grammar pattern. Basically, it's going to end up looking like this. Source, Niyoruto, claim, which basically means according to some source, here's this thing that's true. If you see what I mean, this is a pattern that's actually quite simple when you think about it. I know there are definitely some aspects of the Japanese language that can be very difficult. Kanji, for example, really do take a long time to grasp. But occasionally, there are these smaller units that, once you've learned them, they become very easy to deploy, and honestly, they make pretty good sense. Let's look at some examples. Tomodachi ni yoru to, inu yori neko wa saikou desu. Okay, value judgments aside, this is a perfectly grammatically sound sentence. We have our source, tomodachi, my friend, and we have a claim, inu yori neko wa saikou desu. Really, the most difficult thing here is remembering that the ni yoru to goes after the source and not before it, so it's definitely always backward from the way that we think about things in English. In other words, this sentence is, my friend, according to, compared to dogs, cats are better. Do you see what I'm saying, right? And honestly, that's not even terribly surprising because we already know that Japanese really has a tendency to sound reversed when compared to English, right? So a really good English sentence would be, according to my friend, cats are better than dogs. But the best Japanese sentence here is going to be, tomodachi ni yoru to, inu yori neko wa saikou desu. It feels backward, and that's okay. Important note here, so far I've been saying that this ni yoru to pattern is always going to follow the format of source, ni yoru to, claim. So we have somebody saying something, we have ni yoru to, and then we have the thing that they are saying, or the thing that seems to be true, or the thing that seems to be the case, right? But I just want to make it clear that that claim does not need to be an opinion. It could also be a verifiable fact, right? As in this example. 物理学によると、光速は宇宙で最も速いものである。Hopefully you see what I mean here. Ostensibly, it is a verifiable fact that the fastest thing possible in our entire universe is the speed of light, at least according to physics. 物理学によると。ね? That is not a fact that I'm particularly happy about. I personally think that it feels kinda dumb to have a universal speed limit, and I'm not quite sure why physics decided to do that, or God decided to invent the universe that way, but it's whatever. One way or another, it is a fact. But what I want you to see here is that the second clause in your sentence, the part that comes after ni yoru to, just like 光速は宇宙で最も速いものである, that doesn't need to be somebody's opinion, right? In this case, that's just a verifiable fact. And what is your source for the verifiable fact? Physics, 物理学ですね. Likewise, the source doesn't exactly have to be some very singular individual or authority. So let's look at this sentence. 私の聞いたところによると、来週テストがある。ですね. Don't get confused by the tokoro in this situation, right? You've probably seen tokoro before when it's used as the noun for a place, right? そのところ, このところ, now this place or that place. ですね. But here, it's actually a very different grammar pattern. When tokoro follows a plain past tense verb like kita, it can imply some observation follows, which is as a result of, or based on an observation due to the preceding verb. Which makes sense here, because based on the observation, what I've heard, we have a test next week, right? 私の聞いたところによると based on what I heard 聞いたところですね what I heard 来週テストがある we have a test next week again here the によると is doing the same work that we've seen it do before it's not necessarily based on this expert or based on this field or based on this fact but it's based on what you've heard and that's a perfectly valid way for us to use によると Similarly, we could also have sentences like this one. 私の経験によると漢字は覚えにくいです。ね? This is actually a preview of coming attractions because pretty soon we're going to be learning this にくい pattern. ね? にくい. And that is a pattern that means it's difficult to do some verb. But we're going to save that for the future, so for right now, I just really want to define this sentence as, from my own experience, kanji can be difficult to remember. 私の経験によると、漢字は覚えにくいです. Okay? So basically, I've been showing you this によると grammar pattern, and based on the examples that I've shared with you, I think you can probably see that it's really not that difficult to use. There is, however, another very similar grammar pattern that I also want to introduce to you today, just because it functions in almost exactly the same way as によると, and that is によれば. Basically, によれば is almost exactly 100% the same as によると, almost exactly. We wouldn't really translate them any differently in English, at least not usually, but we could very easily replace によると in any of the above sentences with によれば, right? So I'll just pick one at random. 友達によれば犬より猫は最高です, right? It's the same sentence. According to my friend, cats are better than dogs. And the only thing that we've done here is we've replaced によると with によれば. Basically, there is very little difference between によると and によれば. But from time to time, since I'm a translator, I might find myself in a situation where perhaps some text that I'm looking at, some document or some manga or some anime, right, might use によると and によれば in a way that might require me to define them differently, right? Maybe somebody says 何々々によると and somebody else says いえいえ何々々によれば. Oh, well, that's a situation where that's not good. I'm going to have to treat these as differently. And ordinarily, I wouldn't do that because usually I would just translate both of these as according to. Well, if we had a situation where I absolutely had to treat these differently, I think it would really help to break down exactly what we're seeing in these two very similar grammar patterns, right? So let's do that together. Okay, so we're seeing here によると and によれば. The に particle in によると is marking the source. It follows the speaker, or the authority, or the document, or the event, or the fact that leads to the latter assertion or claim, right? So it's marking the thing that tells us what's going to come after, right? Maybe that's my friend, or maybe that's a textbook, or maybe that's the entire field of physics, right? So that's what ni is doing. It's following the thing that said it. And then yoru is a verb that means to cause, or to be due to. So ni yoru together would be translated as something like due to the preceding trigger, right? Or based on the preceding trigger. And in this case, because this is a ni yoru to pattern, basically the ni yoru here is saying, based on the previous thing, to, and then to is marking what comes after. So to is also a particle just like ni. The to particle is one of the more versatile particles in Japanese. It can mean and, if, when, and in some cases it can even be used to quote speech. So here, to is basically being used to say when this happens. When this thing is true, then this other thing happens, right? So it's marking a conditional. It's playing the same role as the when in a sentence like, when I get in my car, I check my mirrors. It's essentially setting up a conditional like, if X is true, Y is also true. So, in the case that my friend said this thing, this other thing is also true. Or, my friend said this and it leads me to believe this other thing. Based on what my friend said, this claim is true. Now, what's interesting about that is that's pretty much exactly what we're seeing in Niyoreba as well, right? So the ni in Niyoreba is exactly the same ni from Niyoruto, right? It's just marking the speaker or the source, okay? The yore is also the exact same verb. It's yoru. It's just been conjugated. And here, it's conjugated into the hypothetical form so that it can take the conditional particle ba. The hypothetical form in Japanese causes you to convert the final vowel sound in that verb to an e sound, and then you can do something like take ba, which creates a conditional. And since we know that ba is a conditional, basically it means when or if, right? And that's exactly what we were seeing before with to, right? It's conditional, okay? It is my opinion that the ba conditional kind of more strongly means if in most cases. So I usually translate Niyoruto as something like when nani 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 and Niyoreba as if nani nani nani. So if I absolutely had to translate Niyoruto and Niyoreba differently, right? Normally I would not do that. I would translate them both as according to whatever came before, right? According to this or according to that. But if I must translate them differently, then I would do so like this. Tomodachi ni yoru to nani nani nani, I would translate as according to my friend, something something something, whatever the claim would be. And if I had Tomodachi ni yoreba nani nani nani, then I might translate that as if it's according to my friend, something something something. Or if we're going by what my friend said, something something something, right? I would kind of force that if into it in the situation where I absolutely had to treat them as a little bit different, right? Okay. But like I said, these are so similar that you really can use them almost interchangeably in almost all situations. However, there's yet another pattern that is not so perfectly similar, and that is niyotte based kick. Niyotte at first glance looks very much like niyoruto. We can already guess that it's the same ni and it's the same verb. It's yoru and it's just been conjugated into yotte, right? One could almost be forgiven for thinking that you could use these interchangeably as well, but niyotte is employed almost exclusively in cases where the assertion that follows isn't just a rumor or speculation. It's not necessarily just something that you heard. Instead, it's pretty much a guaranteed result. Yeah? Niyotte can also be translated as by means of, right? So, nani 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 niyotte, nani nani nani. By means of this thing, this other thing also happens, right? Because niyotte is a bit different, I'd like to save it for the next lesson, so I want you to be looking out for a more in-depth conversation soon. But for now, though, メネージャー様によれば、私がちょっと休み入ります。According to Manager Sama, I need a little break. So I'm not putting out a grammar drop next week. You'll have to wait 2 weeks for that lesson on niyotte. Until then, see you soon. またね